The Chicago wind had no mercy on a Tuesday night in late October. It cut straight through the old glass door of Millie's Diner on West Adams Street every time someone walked in. And it had been walking in weather since 6 in the morning. Lorovo had been on her feet for 9 hours by the time the dinner rush arrived. Her black apron damp at the edges and her ponytail fighting to stay neat against the humidity rising from the soup station. Most people called her Laura, her. Mother still called her Lorovo because she said it was the kind of name a girl needed to carry herself through hard times, the kind of name that held weight. Tonight Laura was carrying more than her name. She was carrying 4 plates of meatloaf, 2 bowls of chowder, a sleeping worry about her mother's hospital bill that had arrived that morning, and the quiet pride of a woman who never let anyone see her stumble. Millie's was not glamorous. It had red vinyl booths patched with electrical tape, a jukebox that only worked when you hit it on the left side, and a neon sign in the window that buzzed faintly like a tired bee. But it was honest, and the food was real, and the regulars were loyal. Laura had worked here for 2 years since putting her law degree in a drawer and deciding that the debt could wait while her mother could not. She was refilling coffee at table 7 when the door opened and the cold swept in with a different kind of company. There were 4 of them. Men in suits that cost more than Laura's rent, shoes polished like they had never touched a sidewalk. At the front of the group walked a man who filled the doorway without trying. He was tall, dark-haired, probably late 30s, with the kind of jaw that photographers loved and the kind of eyes that looked through people rather than at them. He glanced around Millie's the way a person glances at something. They stepped in by accident. Laura recognized him from a news segment she had half-watched at the hospital while waiting for her mother's test results. Preston Hale, real estate billionaire. Built half the luxury towers going up along the lakefront. His name appeared on buildings the way regular people's names appeared on receipts, quickly and then forgotten. He was in the news constantly, usually smiling beside a politician or standing in front of a ribbon with oversized scissors. He did not look like he was smiling now. His assistant, a thin young man with nervous hands, leaned toward him and said something in his ear. Laura caught the words "closest place" and 15 minutes and understood. These were men who had somewhere better to be and had landed here by accident, like expensive birds blown off course. Dottie Milner, Laura's co-worker and the closest thing she had to a sister, appeared from behind the counter with menus tucked under her arm. Dottie was 41, round-cheeked, and had the energy of someone who had decided that life was too short to stop moving. She smiled at the group with her full professional warmth and guided them toward the big corner booth near the window. Laura continued her rounds. Table 9 needed more water. Table 3 had a birthday. Table 12, a retired postal worker named Earl, wanted to tell her about his daughter's new baby for the 4th time this week, and she listened with genuine warmth because Earl had no one else to tell. It was around 9 o'clock when she swung by the corner booth to see if Dottie needed backup. The 4 men had eaten quickly and were now lingering over coffee, the conversation loud and loose the way men get when they are comfortable with power and forgetful of others. Preston Hale had his phone out and was reading something with a frown. His associate, a broad-shouldered man with a gold watch, was telling a story that made the others laugh. Laura reached past the associate to collect an empty plate, and as she did, the associate shifted in his seat and knocked his elbow into her arm. Not hard, not malicious, just careless. A small splash of coffee hit the sleeve of her uniform. She reached for the napkins quietly, without complaint. "Leave it," Preston said. He was not speaking to her with cruelty exactly, but with the casual dismissal of someone addressing furniture that had inconvenienced them. He did not look up from his phone. "We're almost done here." "Wrap up the check." Laura paused. She finished wiping her sleeve without acknowledging the comment and began stacking plates. The associate with the gold watch leaned back and looked at her, the way some men did, the long look that felt like an appraisal. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Laura," she said evenly, not offering more than that. "Laura," he repeated, stretching the word. "What do you do when you're not serving coffee, Laura?" He glanced at his companions with a grin that suggested he found this very entertaining. "Same thing," she said, and turned to go. That was when Preston Hale put his phone down and spoke. Clearly, and without lowering his voice, in the way of a man who had never been told to lower it, "Don't bother. Every woman in a place like this is here because she ran out of options. They know that. It's not rude, it's just economics." The table went quiet. Even his own associates seemed to sense that a line had been crossed. Dottie, who had appeared near the counter with a fresh pot of coffee, went very still. The whole diner did not go silent, not exactly. But the two nearest booths lost their momentum in that way people do. When they are pretending not to listen while listening completely, Laura stopped walking. She turned around slowly, and when she looked at Preston Hale, she did not look at him with hurt or anger. She looked at him with something cleaner and more devastating than either. She looked at him with absolute calm. "You're Preston Hale," she said, her voice steady and carrying just enough to reach the nearby tables. "You put your name on buildings so people will not forget it, because you know that nothing you say is worth remembering." She set the plates down on the edge of the table with quiet care. "I have a law degree from Northwestern. I am here because I chose to be, because my mother is sick, and this job gives me flexible hours. I am not here because I ran out of options. I am here because I understand what real work looks like." She looked at him without blinking. "What is your excuse for not knowing the difference?" The associate with the gold watch made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a cough. Preston Hale stared at her. For a long moment, he did not say anything, and that silence was more powerful than anything that had come before it. He was a man who always had words, always had a response, always held the room, and she had just taken it from him quietly and completely. In a diner on West Adams Street, someone at table 5 began to clap. Slowly at first, and then table 9 joined in. And then Earl from table 12 let out a bark of approval that broke the spell entirely. Laura picked up her plates and walked to the kitchen. Dottie met her at the pass-through with wide eyes. "Laura, that man is worth $4 billion. "Good for him," Laura said, and pushed through the kitchen door. She did not know that someone at table 5 had been recording on their phone. She did not know that within 48 hours the video would have 2 million views, and a headline that read, "Waitress delivers perfect response to billionaire's insult." She did not know that Preston Hale would watch that clip 7 times before midnight. Not with anger, but with something that unsettled him far more. She did not know any of this yet. All she knew was that her feet hurt. Her mother needed her, and she had not run out of options. She never had. The video did not just spread. It burned. By Thursday morning, it had crossed 5 million views, and every major entertainment news outlet had picked up the story. Some framing it as a feel-good moment, others using it to write think pieces about class and arrogance in modern America. A morning talk show played the clip 3 times in one segment. A senator shared it with the caption, "This is what dignity looks like." Preston Hale watched all of it from the 42nd floor of the Hale Tower on Michigan Avenue. Standing in front of windows that overlooked a city he had spent 15 years reshaping, his PR manager, Renata Solis, sat across from his desk in a tailored charcoal blazer, her tablet propped in her lap like a shield. Scrolling through damage reports, with the focused misery of someone cataloging a flood. "The sentiment is running 73% against you," Renata said, not looking up. "Sponsors are watching. The Millbrook Development Partners sent a message this morning asking for a call. It is not a friendly call." She finally looked at him. "We need a statement. Something warm, something human. An apology tour, ideally." Preston had not touched his coffee. He was still looking out at the city, at the gray water of the lake cutting the horizon. At the cranes, standing over his newest tower on the north end. "Find her," he said. Renata blinked. "I'm sorry." "The woman from the diner Larovo? Find out who she is?" He turned from the window. Her full name, her background, where she studied everything. Renata's expression shifted into something careful and precise, the look she wore when she was deciding how to manage him. "Preston, the last thing we need right now is for it to look like you are investigating a waitress who embarrassed you. The optics alone would. I am not managing optics, Renata. I am asking a question. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. Find her. Renata found her by noon. Lorovo Brennan, 29 years old. Graduated top of her class from Northwestern Pritzker School of Law 3 years prior. Had clerked briefly at a mid-sized firm in the Loop before leaving abruptly. Now employed at Millie's Diner, West Adams Street. Mother 1, Patricia Brennan, listed as a patient at Mercy Hospital, chronic kidney disease, ongoing treatment. No social media presence beyond a dormant professional profile. No debt collections. No lawsuits. Nothing that would give Preston Hale leverage, which was usually what he looked for first. He sat with the file for a long time, reading it twice, and when he was done, he leaned back in his chair and felt something he had not felt in years. Embarrassment. Not the public kind. Not the kind that came with bad press and lost sponsors. The private kind. The kind that lives in the chest and will not leave. He had been wrong. Not just tactless, not just careless with words, the way powerful men sometimes were when they forgot to perform humility. He had been genuinely, substantially wrong. The woman had a Northwestern law degree and was working double shifts to keep her mother alive. And he had used her as an example of failure. Preston Hale had built his reputation on being right about people. He could walk into a room and within 4 minutes know who was worth his time and who was performing. He had trusted that instinct above almost everything else. And he had looked at Lorovo Brennan across a tired diner booth and seen nothing at all. He picked up his phone and called Theo Wainwright, his personal assistant, who answered on the first ring in the quiet, competent way he always did. I need you to set up a meeting, Preston said. With the Millbrook partners? No, with a woman named Lorovo Brennan. She works at Millie's Diner on West Adams. Do not call ahead. I will go there. There was a brief pause on Theo's end, the kind that meant he had questions, but knew better than to ask them yet. What time? Tomorrow morning? Early, before her shift. Laura found the note tucked under the door of her apartment at 7 the next morning. A Friday slid through the gap with the kind of precision that suggested someone who did not do things by accident. It was a single index card, handwritten, which surprised her. She had expected a letter from a law office or a cease and desist from some corporate PR team, which was what Dottie had been predicting nervously all week. Instead, the card said, I owe you an apology and a conversation. I will be at Millie's at 8 tomorrow morning. You do not have to come, but I think you should. Preston Hale. Laura read it standing in her doorway in her robe, her hair still pinned from sleep. She turned the card over. Nothing on the back. She read it again, then set it on her kitchen table and made coffee and stood at her window watching the street wake up and thought about it. For a long time, she arrived at Millie's at 7:58. He was already there. Preston Hale sat in the same corner booth where the whole thing had started, except this morning he was alone and he was not wearing a suit. Dark jeans, a gray pullover, no tie. He looked like a man who had made a deliberate decision to be uncomfortable and was following through with it. His hands were wrapped around a mug of coffee, and he stood when she walked in, which she had not expected. Thank you for coming, he said. Laura sat across from him without ceremony. You have 10 minutes. I have prep work before my shift. He nodded. I will use them well. He sat back down and met her eyes directly, which she noted. A lot of men who owed apologies found ways to deliver them while looking slightly to the left. What I said was wrong. Not just impolite. Not just bad press. Wrong. I made an assumption about your life that had no basis in fact, and I said it out loud in a public place without any concern for the person I was saying it about. Laura waited. She had heard many apologies in courtroom settings and dining rooms and across kitchen tables. She had learned to hear whether they were performances or whether they were real. I read your file, he continued. She raised an eyebrow. Did you now? No, that sounds worse. I understand that. I wanted to understand who I had spoken to that way. What I found made it worse for me, not better. He set down his mug. You gave up a legal career to take care of your mother. That is not running out of options. That is choosing the harder option on purpose for someone else. I said something stupid because I was distracted and careless, and you were right to call me on it. Laura looked at him for a moment. Why are you here personally? Your PR team could have issued a statement. You could have sent flowers and a gift card. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the first sign of one. Because a statement would have been for the cameras. This is for you. The silence between them settled into something less hostile.
Right.
Apology noted. I also have a proposition, Preston said, and when her expression sharpened, he held up one hand. A professional one. He pulled a slim folder from the seat beside him and placed it on the table without pushing it toward her, letting her choose whether to reach for it. I have a legal dispute. Running for 8 months on a development project in the South Side. It involves a community housing agreement that my company signed 7 years ago and has been in violation of for the last 2. 40 families are being displaced. My in-house legal team has been trying to contain the fallout rather than actually solve the problem. Laura looked at the folder but did not touch it. And you want a waitress to fix it. I want a Northwestern law graduate who understands what 40 families losing their homes actually means to fix it, he said evenly. The salary would be substantial. I am not asking you to stop caring about your mother or bend your principles. I am asking you to use what you know. Laura finally reached for the folder. She opened it and read the first 2 pages with the focused silence of someone who had never really stopped being a lawyer. Preston watched her without speaking. Theo Wainwright later told a colleague was unusual because Preston always filled silences. The case was real. It was serious. The Southgate housing development had been built on an agreement with the city that promised below-market units to existing community residents for 15 years. Halley Development had bought the property for years in and had been quietly converting units to market rate, using legal gray areas and delayed paperwork as cover. 41 families had received displacement notices in the past year. Laura closed the folder. You did this? She said. It was not a question. Preston did not look away. My company did it. Under my watch, which means I did it. Now you want to fix it. I want someone who actually cares about those families to help me fix it correctly, he said. Not paper over it. Not find a settlement that makes the headlines go away. Actually fix it. Laura set the folder back on the table. She looked out the window at the street, at the city that pressed forward without apology every single morning, at the cranes on the horizon that bore his name. She thought about her father who had died before she finished college, and her mother who was fighting to stay, and the law degree in the drawer that she had not touched in 3 years. I set my own hours, she said. My mother's appointments come first, always. Understood. I report to no one but you. And I tell you the truth, even when it is not what you want to hear, I expect nothing less. And if I find that your company is irredeemably at fault, I will say so publicly if it comes to that. Preston held her gaze. I know. Laura was quiet for a moment. Then she extended her hand across the table. I will need 2 weeks of the case files before I touch anything else. Preston shook her hand. And when their palms met, she felt that small, inconvenient, completely unwelcome warmth that sometimes comes with touching the hand of a person who is going to matter. She pulled her hand back and stood up. Have a shift to start, she said. Of course. Preston stood again. That same instinctive courtesy she had noticed the first time. The kind that came from somewhere genuine rather than from training. As she walked behind the counter and tied on her apron. Dottie appeared beside her immediately with the expression of a woman who had been watching from the kitchen window for the past 20 minutes and had opinions about all of it. That man shook. Your hand like it was the most important thing he did all week, Dottie whispered. Don't start, Laura said. I'm just saying what I saw. Pour coffee. Dottie poured the coffee, but she was smiling. And Laura kept her back turned so her friend would not see that she was smiling a little too. Not because of him, she told herself. Because she was going back to work. The real work. The work her father would have recognized. She picked up a pot of coffee and started her rounds. And the morning moved forward the way mornings do, pressing on without waiting to be told it was allowed. The 2 weeks Laura had asked for turned into the most consuming 14 days she had experienced since her final year of law school. Preston's team delivered 12 boxes of case files to her apartment on a Tuesday morning, stacked in the hallway like a small city. And Laura built her own city right back from the wreckage of what she found inside them. She worked at her kitchen table every night after visiting her mother at Mercy Hospital, spreading documents across the surface until there was no room left, moving coffee cups to the windowsill, eating sandwiches standing up because sitting down felt like surrendering momentum. The picture that emerged from those files was not flattering. It was not even complicated. It was simply a story of a powerful company choosing convenience over conscience, one small legal workaround at a time, until 41 families were standing on the edge of losing everything they had built. The Southgate community had been there before the development. There were people in those files who had lived on those streets for 30 years, who had raised children in those apartments, whose mothers had died in those rooms. When Hale Development purchased the property 4 years ago, the existing community agreement had been inherited as part of the deal. Someone in the legal department had flagged it. The flag had been ignored. Laura made notes in the margins in red pen. She underlined dates. She cross-referenced permits with city records and found 3 separate instances where paperwork had been filed late enough to avoid mandatory community review. Each instance alone might have been an oversight. Together, they formed a pattern that no judge would misread. On the 15th day, she called Preston directly. Not through Theo, not by email. He answered on the second ring. "I am ready to talk," she said. "My office. Whenever you want." "Neutral ground," she said. "The public library on State Street. Conference room 3. Noon." There was a brief pause. "I will be there." He was there at 11:50 with Theo beside him, carrying a laptop and the quiet, focused energy of someone who had been briefed thoroughly on the way over. Laura arrived at noon exactly with her files in a structured binder, her hair down for the first time he had seen it, wearing a dark blue blazer over a simple white shirt, looking precisely like what she was, a lawyer who had come to deliver a verdict. She laid out everything she had found across the conference table without softening the presentation. She walked him through the timeline, the ignored flags, the late permits, the pattern of avoidance. She showed him the names of the families, not as a rhetorical device but as a matter of record, because she believed that anyone making decisions about people's lives should have to look at their names. Preston did not interrupt her once. He read what she put in front of him, asked 3 precise questions, and then sat back and was quiet for a long time. "How bad is it legally?" he finally asked. "Bad enough that if the families file a class action, and they will if this drags on, a competent judge will rule against you without much deliberation." The community agreement was legally binding. Violations were systematic. The damages would be significant. But that is not actually the worst part. He looked at her. The worst part, Laura said, is that these people trusted the agreement. They stayed. They turned down other housing options because they believed the contract meant something. The financial damage is one thing. What was taken from them in terms of stability and trust is another. She held his gaze steadily. "You need to know both things before we talk about a path forward." Preston looked at the names on the page in front of him. He was quiet for long enough that Theo shifted slightly in his chair. Then Preston said, "Tell me what the right thing to do looks like." And that was the moment Laura understood that he was not performing. He was not managing a crisis. He was asking a genuine question from a place of genuine uncertainty. The way a person asks when they already know the answer will cost them something, and they are asking anyway, she told him. Full restoration of the community agreement for all remaining tenants. Financial compensation for the 3 families who had already left due to the displacement pressure. A legally binding amendment to the original agreement, extending its terms by 10 additional years. A community oversight board with real authority, not an advisory panel with no teeth. Preston listened to all of it. Then he said, "Draft the agreement. I will sign it." Renata Solis found out about the plan on a Thursday afternoon and arrived at Hale Tower in a state of controlled fury that she wore like a second blazer. She stood in Preston's office and presented him with a counterproposal. A compromise settlement that would satisfy the minimum legal requirement and protect the company's financial position while offering the families a lump sum. Payment that sounded generous until you did the actual math. "This is the smart move," Renata said, her voice precise and persuasive. "Laura Brennan has been here 2 weeks, and she is already rewriting your company's liability exposure. That is not consulting, Preston. That is someone building a case." Preston was at his window again, looking at the city. "She is building a solution," he said. "She is building a reputation." "On your back." Renata set the counter-proposal on his desk. "At least read it." "I have read it, no." Renata's composure slipped just slightly. "Preston, the board is already restless. The Southgate situation, combined with the benefit reforms you implemented last quarter, have every major investor asking questions. If you hand these families everything Brennan is asking for, the quarterly numbers will take a hit that the board will not absorb quietly. Then the board will be uncomfortable," Preston said, and turned to face her. "I signed that community agreement. My company signed it, which means I signed it. Uncomfortable is what we deserve to." B. Renata stared at him for a moment, and then picked up her counter-proposal and left without another word. 3 days later, the board called a special session. Laura heard about it from Theo, who texted her on a Saturday morning with characteristic understatement. "Board meeting Monday? Significant. Thought you should know?" She called Preston immediately but got his voicemail. She drove to Hale Tower anyway. Not because she had a plan, but because she understood that a person standing alone in a room full of people who want to remove them deserves to know. Someone is in the building. The lobby was quieter on a Saturday. A security guard she had never seen before started to turn her away, and she gave him her name and told him to call Theo Wainwright. Theo came down himself and brought her upstairs. She found Preston in his office. Not behind his desk, but sitting on the low sofa near the window that she had never seen him use before. Jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a glass of water untouched on the table in front of him. He looked up when she walked in, and his expression did something complicated and then settled. "You did not have to come," he said. "I know," she said, and sat in the chair across from him. The city glittered through the window behind him. Every light a small argument against the dark. And Laura thought about how strange it was that a man surrounded by all of this could still look the way he looked right now, which was simply like a person who was tired and not sure what came next. "They have the votes," Preston said. 11 board members. I control 36% of the shares. If they move to restructure leadership, there is a legal path, and they know it." He looked at the water glass. Renata gave them the ammunition. Not maliciously, I think. She genuinely believes this is bad management. "What do you believe?" Laura asked. He looked at her directly. "I believe I should have done this 4 years ago when my legal team first flagged the Southgate agreement. I believe that if I had listened then, none of this would be a crisis now. It would just be a company keeping its word." He paused. "I also believe that I spent 15 years building something that looks impressive from the outside and is hollow in the middle. Because I built it the way my father taught me, which was to measure everything in returns and trust nothing that could not be quantified." Laura was quiet for a moment. What changed? The question sat between them simply, without weight or agenda, and Preston looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You told a room full of people that your choices were your own," he said. "That you were not there because you ran out of options. That you were there because you understood what real work looked like." He picked up the water glass and set it down again without drinking. "I have been thinking about that ever since. Because I have never once chosen the harder thing when the easier thing was available. Every corner my company cut, every community agreement my team bent, or delayed, or worked around. Every decision I approved without reading the human cost in the footnotes. I always told myself it was smart business." He looked at her steadily. It was not smart. It was afraid. Laura felt something shift in the room. Not dramatically. Not with any gesture or movement. Just the quiet, irreversible shift of one honest thing being said after a long time of other things. "The board meeting is Monday," she said finally. "Yes." "When this is over, and I do not mean the board meeting, I mean, when the agreement is signed and the families are protected and the legal work is done, I would like to ask you something that has nothing to do with work." Laura looked at him for a moment, then said, "Ask it now." He blinked. He had not expected that. "I have been a lawyer long enough to know that waiting for the right moment is often just another way of losing your nerve," she said simply. "Ask it now." Preston set down the water glass and looked at her with an expression that she would remember for a long time. Open and unguarded and completely without the armor that usually lived in his face. "I would like to know if you will have dinner with me," he said. "Not as a client or an employer or a public apology. Just as a person who finds you extraordinary and would like to spend time in your company for reasons that are entirely personal and have no legal component whatsoever." Looked at him for a moment that stretched just long enough to be honest. "After the agreement is signed," she said, and the slight curve of her mouth told him everything the words held back. "You focus on Monday? I will focus on the filing. When both are done? Yes." So the word landed between them quietly. The way important words always do, without fanfare, without drama. Just the clean weight of a real thing being said and heard. On Monday morning, Preston walked into the board meeting with the Svelkit Community Agreement fully drafted. All 41 families covered, the oversight board included, the 10-year extension in writing. He presented it before a single objection could be raised. 7 board members pushed back hard. 3 threatened to divest. 1 left the meeting entirely. First aid by Friday, the agreement was filed with the city. Judge Calvin Price, a senior judge known for his sharp reading of community agreements, signed off on the framework within the week and noted in his comments that it represented a standard of corporate accountability that he hoped other developers would study. Laura was at Mercy Hospital when Theo sent her the confirmation. She was sitting beside her mother's bed, her mother's hand in hers, reading aloud from a book her mother liked, and when the notification came through, she paused and looked at it, and felt the particular satisfaction of something done correctly, done completely, done for the right reasons, which is the only kind of satisfaction that sits still inside you and does not ask for more. Her mother, Patricia Brennan, a woman who had survived more than most and carried it with the quiet dignity of the genuinely strong, looked over at her daughter's expression and said, "Good news? Work," Laura said. Patricia studied her for a moment, with the precision of a mother who had been watching her daughter's face her entire life. "And something else," she said. Laura smiled and went back to reading. 2 weeks later, she had dinner with Preston at a small Lebanese restaurant in Pilsen that she had chosen because the food was honest and the lighting was soft and the tables were close enough together that you had to speak at a human volume, which she had decided was a useful test of character for a man who had spent 15 years surrounded by people who performed loudly in large rooms. He passed without effort. He spoke to the server by name after she introduced herself. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He talked about his father without making it into a polished narrative, just the complicated truth of a man who had been loved imperfectly and had tried to build his own version of strength from the pieces that remained. Laura told him about her father, too. About the day she had stood in the law school admissions office with her acceptance letter and called him from a payphone because she did not own a mobile yet, and how he had been so quiet on the other end of the line that she had asked if he was still there, and he had said yes. He was just trying to hold on to the moment before it moved forward into ordinary time. He had died 14 months later, and she had never told the story to anyone who was not already part of it. Preston listened to the whole thing, without saying anything until she was done. And then he said he would have been proud of Monday. Laura looked at him across the small table, across the candlelight, and the honest food and the city pressing warmly around them on all sides, and she thought about the video that had started all of it, and the note under her door, and the conference room at the public library, and the moment he had said the word afraid and meant it. He would have liked you, she said, and meant it completely. Preston reached across the table and covered her hand with his, not reaching for anything, not asking for anything, just the simple human gesture of being present with another person in a moment that mattered outside. Chicago continued being Chicago, loud and cold and magnificent and indifferent. And inside the small restaurant in Pilsen, Grovo Brennan sat across from a man who had tried to put a price on a woman's dignity and had learned, instead, what dignity actually costs, which is everything comfortable and convenient and small inside a person, and how willingly a person will pay it when the right reason appears. She had never had a price. She had only ever had a standard. And for the first time in 3 years, sitting in the warm light of a city she had never left, and a life she had never stopped building, quietly in the background of hard days, she felt that standard rising to meet something worthy of it. The evening moved forward the way good evenings do, slowly and without apology, and neither of them wanted it to end.